My name is Roy Rao. I'm the Startup Grind Director at Chengdu, China. Startup Grind is a global community for entrepreneurs, and we share the values to help others get first and embrace the value of the community in Chengdu, China.
My name is Daphne Charles, and I'm from Port-au-Prince, Haiti. I'm the Startup Grind Director for Port-au-Prince, Haiti.
Jens Warnborg from Startup Grind Hong Kong.
My name is Sergio Mattei. I'm coming from Moldova.
Startup Grind, a great way to get new ideas, meet new people, and a great global network.
We educate entrepreneurs all around the world. Join the movement.
At one point, I really realized I want to be surrounded by people who really want to change something. Entrepreneurs, community builders, people who really want to move something around.
It's truly an amazing experience. For me, it was really a good entry point to enter the startup world. So my background is in finance and investing. I went to the Euro conference in London and then attended my first global conference last year and this year again. I met so many interesting people. If you have any hesitations, you truly need to get connected in your local chapter.
Basically what we do is try to reach for the best speaker possible that will allow founders to learn. You have to meet a lot of people and you have to create a real connection with those people, focusing on adding value to their lives, but also in learning and helping them in every way you can and to scale faster.
Startup Grind gave me the opportunity to really achieve that. So now I'm running one of the most active chapters in China and in the world. And I am on a daily basis meeting so amazing people, entrepreneurs, investors, corporates. I'm really grateful being part of this amazing community.
San Francisco, Lagos,
New York City,
Dubai,
Dublin,
Oakland,
China,
and Moldova. Hello everyone, thanks for coming today here. This is the agenda, we got quite a bit late. So about us, we already made 33 events since 2016. And yeah, all the speakers actually, it's all foreign. We don't have local speakers, all of them also. We try to invite the best speaker possible to the audience so you can get real value. We will have slido.com. It's a platform that you can ask questions online. Everybody can vote the best question will bring on the top, and our host will ask you to our speaker. This is our beloved partners who we want to say big thanks to them, especially for our general partner Orange, because they allowed us to use this space. Thanks a lot. And second is US Embassy, because we bring our speaker today because of them. A lot of support from them. So another one, it's Entrepreneurship Academy from European Fund and Ministerul Educației și Culturii și Economice, and our event partner for today. How you saw, it's Salcuța Winer. You can take a glass of wine and ventilate yourself. After we will have networking. You also can stay and networking with everybody. Now I would like to invite my colleague from DreamUps, Daniela. She will do something interesting. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Hi everyone. Who's been to our Startup Grind events before? Or to the last one actually? The last one we had. Okay, just a few of you. Okay, good. So what we try to do at the beginning of the Startup Grind events, so the Startup Grind event in general is around a lot of networking. And I know we have a problem with, networking and getting to know people that you don't know in the audience, get to know what they're doing, get to know about their business and stuff. So what we're trying to do is encourage that networking and get you to improve your networking skills. So what we do at the beginning of the events is do a bit of an ice-breaking exercise. So I'll give you 1 minute, and what you have to do is turn around to the person you don't know, no cheating, you don't speak to the person next to you that's your friend, and you have 1 minute to get to know each other. I don't know, tell them one thing you can offer. what you're good at, what's your business, or anything. So I'll set the timer now, and last time we did that, we went over time because I couldn't stop people talking, so. Okay, go. Just turn around to the people, get to know them. Hey, well done, everyone. Woo! You can stop now.
Insomma, cifra scientifica. Noi cap.
If you hear me.
If you hear me, clap one time. If you hear me, clap 2 times. If you hear me, clap 3 times. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, everyone. That was very good. I hope you're warmed up now, if you haven't been. And I guess I can, without further ado, invite our special guest and our beloved host on the stage and get it started. Olga, our host of tonight, please come over. And Jan, yay!
Yeah, hi everyone. Good evening, Jan.
Good evening.
Oh well, very nice to meet you all. Jan, thank you very much for joining us for this wonderful event. Jan is coming from Boston, and it was quite a long way to get here, right? How do you like Moldova so far?
It's great. That's right. The people have been great. I've had a good time, and one of the things I learned today is that entrepreneurs are the same from whatever country you come from. Entrepreneurs want to change the world, and it's fun to spend time with entrepreneurs. So, and all the ones who met me today, I enjoyed it probably more than you did. So, thank you.
Okay. Ian, I know you have different hats that you wear in these days.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? What do you do? I know at least 4 different hats, so I can I can add on if you want.
Okay, so current jobs. So I teach entrepreneurship at Boston University. So I teach it to mostly MBA students at the moment, actually. So that's one hat, right? 2 hats. I run the Entrepreneurship Center at Boston University. So entrepreneurship centers are happening at all of the US universities. So our job is to kind of put an entrepreneurial mindset into the minds of our students. 3rd hat, I'm an angel investor, so I'm a member of a large angel group in Boston called Launchpad Venture Group. And 4th hat, I'm also on the board of a not-for-profit called TCN, which is an organization that teaches entrepreneurs how to get funding, so which I think will be appropriate for tonight. So I think those are, yeah.
I would add here, you are a mentor, and also you participate in jury when you select who is going to get the funding.
Yeah, so I'm also a judge and mentor in many of the events, and also having a miserable year this year as a Manchester United supporter. So anybody like the Premier League here? I just one, really? All right, we'll talk afterwards, Andrew.
And I believe your love for Manchester is coming because of your origin. You're not an American, you are a UK guy, right?
Well, I am an American, right?
No.
I was born in the UK, born near Manchester, so first part of my career was in the UK, and then I moved to the US, and all my entrepreneurial activities though have been in the US. So I started a company in the US, a venture capital funded company in the US. I was also CEO of another venture capital company. So all my entrepreneurial experience has been in the United States, specifically in Boston, which for those of you who don't know, many of you probably think that all the entrepreneurs are in Silicon Valley. Like there's nothing outside Silicon Valley in the US. So Boston, from a worldwide perspective, Boston I think is the 5th most important entrepreneurial ecosystem in the world. So we attract the second highest amount of venture capital in the US. So Boston's very strong entrepreneurial ecosystem, especially in life sciences, and strong in like enterprise software. We're kind of very serious people in Boston, so we don't mess around with any Facebooks or that. We do serious software and we save people's lives in Boston. So.
No, Facebook is coming also from Boston, Harvard, very close.
I know, but we threw it out. We made it go to Silicon Valley. So.
Ian, I know you have a very extensive entrepreneurial experience. Right. Also, you raised $100 million, yeah. Probably already more. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience? How did you start, and where did you get?
All right. So my career was before I became an entrepreneur. My career was I was a technology person in telecommunications. So in connecting, in networking basically, and it was kind of interesting because when I first got into that, I was thinking, what a terrible mistake I made. This is like a really, really boring industry. Like all the sexy people were in computing, like the programmers and the analysts, and I'm like, shit, why didn't I go in that industry? Why did I choose telecoms? Everybody hates us, everybody abuses us when the network doesn't work. And so I'm like, that was a really dumb mistake, but then it was too late. So I'm in telecoms. But then, thank God, we invented the internet. Because guess who were the sexiest people on the planet when they invented the internet? Right, the networking guys, right? So they found us in a basement, they got us out of the basement and said, okay, you're the new stars. And so basically my startups were about building equipment to help scale the internet. So I went from a boring job to an exciting job, which was great. So in terms of how I got starting companies, it was based on expertise in that technology, and then seeing all the problems that we had in the networks, because the networks would grow, the traffic was growing faster than the networks could cope with. And the equipment that was forming the backbone of the internet was not, was repurposed equipment from the enterprise. It was not good enough to build, massive internet data networks on. So we started building it. So I recognized that problem, and several of my friends went off and did other companies, and so we built equipment to help scale the internet. So I did that I did a couple of those, and dealt with venture capitalists, and we can talk about this probably at some point. But at some point I'd had enough of venture capitalists. They drove me crazy. So then I went into angel investing. So for the sake of the conversation today, I've been an entrepreneur, and I've also been an investor as well. And then I got the opportunity to teach, and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. I didn't expect it to be a full-time job, but it became a full-time job. So that's how I got to where I am now.
What I hear is your skills and your talent, it met the opportunity at the right moment. Yes. This is where you strive. I have a question. We will speak about startups here, right, and funding and how to grow your business. And I know you already met a few startups in Moldova. Do you see any difference between the startups in the US and what you've seen here?
So I think, as I said in my opening remarks, entrepreneurs are very similar. They don't see problems. They only see opportunities. They want to change things, and there's no difference between a Moldavian entrepreneur or an American entrepreneur. And I think there's also some myths about American entrepreneurs. I was in a meeting the other day, and I said, Moldovan entrepreneurs are the same as American entrepreneurs. They always think there's not enough funding available. And people laughed at me, like, in America there isn't enough funding? But of course, there's always more entrepreneurs than there is funding, whatever country you're in. No, I think what's different, and you guys are more expert than this than me, is what we have in the US is a very developed infrastructure to support entrepreneurs. You know, whether that's mentoring or funding or accelerators. You know, this ecosystem has happened over 20 years or 30 years, and you're just developing that. You're at the beginning of that journey, but you know, it's happening. So I know it's probably not happening as fast as most of you in this group would like. I can't help you too much with that, but I think it's happening.
You know, I remember we were talking with you when I was in Boston, and you said we were talking about access to funding, and we were discussing like, do entrepreneurs really lack financing? And you said no, the good idea, the investor will come and search for the good ideas. There is no problem in access to funding to look for financing. It's opposite. It's the good ideas are really lacking in the US.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have a lot of businesses that are just copying other people's ideas. They're not original. They're not, really solving problems for people. And so, you know, the investment, you know, it's for the investors to try and sort through the ones who are going to change, to solve real problems and change the world, and the ones that they don't. But you know that American investors make lots of mistakes, right? You've been watching WeWork?
Yes.
Right? So I mean, I think about how difficult it is for investors. So if you think about venture capitalists, so if you think venture capitalists are supposed to be the best people to pick deals in the world, right? That's what they're trained for, that's what their career is. All they do is look at deals. And out of 10 deals, how many deals do they get right? 1 or 2, right? Now, if 1 or 2 of those turn out to be Google or Facebook, then they're geniuses. But 8 of them didn't make money for it. So it's, you know, for investor, it's, and for entrepreneurs, there's that match to be made between, you know, real opportunity and things that turn out not to be real opportunities.
Yeah, and as an investor, what are you looking in a startup, in an early stage startup, when you think about financing? Why would you fund a startup?
So why would you fund a startup? What do you guys think the answer is to that? They can shout. I'll repeat it. If you were looking at a team, what would you be looking for as the first thing you might want to, you would look at? How big is the market, right? How big is the market?
The social impact.
The social impact. So you want to fund startups that have a social impact? Yeah, that's great. What other things should you look at if you're looking at startups? Strong team. Strong team. Yeah, passion, enthusiasm. What was that? Grit, I like that one. Resilience, right? Resilience is a great word for entrepreneurs. I think, you know, when you ask American investors that question, they tell you lies most of the time, because, you know, one of the things they say is, we just invest in the team, right? We don't care about the idea, we just invest in the team. That's just BS, you know, that's just, you know, I don't imagine a professional investor would invest in a bad idea just because it's a team, but the team is very important. And what do they say? It's that A team and B idea could still be a success, because the A team will make that B idea into an A idea. You know, they'll figure it out along the way. But a B or C team with an A idea, it's probably not going to be successful because it's execution. So you're looking at a startup's ability to execute, but you're also looking at the idea: is it addressing a big enough market? Is it solving a real problem? I like the word grit and resilience, definitely.
Do you look at financials, any projections?
So, one of the hardest classes that I have to teach is when I teach financial projections to startups. it's especially difficult to teach MBAs, because MBAs think that there's some magic formula to putting together projections. And when I tell them that there isn't, they feel like I'm lying to them and keeping the secret hidden from them. So you do look at financials, mostly from the point of view of trying to understand what drives the business. You know, what are the revenue drivers in the business? What has to happen to drive growth? But as an investor, you have to be investing in a business that can be big. You know, because, you know, you said 1 out of 10 are successful, or 2 out of 10 are successful. If you think about the maths on that, that means those 1 or 2 have to be really, really successful. So you have to, all of your bets have to be with companies that could achieve, if everything went well for them, could achieve really high growth and achieve really high revenues in 4 to 5 years. And then, so I sometimes have entrepreneurs say to me, well, we're only going to get to 5 million in 5 years, but we're a very safe bet. We're definitely going to do that. And that's just not interesting for a growth investor. It has to be capable of being high growth, and then you hope 2 of those 10 or 1 of those 10 makes those numbers.
What would be the most common mistakes that startup made during the growth phase, during the early stage to the growth phase?
So growth is very it's a difficult area for entrepreneurs, you know, because they're very good at getting things started. Their team is very good at getting things started, but growing requires a different skill set in some ways, because now you have to optimize. You have to start optimizing your company around how it's operating. And so sometimes entrepreneurs don't have the team doesn't have the right skill set. So that's one mistake, is you don't have the people that can drive growth. I think the other you know, another big mistake is really not understanding what what we call in startups the growth engine. What is the growth engine that's going to drive that forward? You know, do we really understand that? Do we know that if we put so much money here, it will continue to drive growth? So it becomes, you know, you need to understand the metrics. And what I've seen with some startups is they get fooled by some early sales that they're now in the growth period, but actually those first few customers were not representative of the big market. They were just crazy people buying the product, right? Because probably any product we come up with, we can get one customer from. There's plenty of crazy people in the world, but is that representative of a real market? So what I see entrepreneurs do is they get fooled by those first few sales to think that they now have what's called, you know, product fit to market. You know, we have a product and we have a market, and they're really sort of kidding themselves that they've found the market. So this is the time when entrepreneurs have to be very realistic and very pragmatic and about whether they really have found product fit to market, or it's just a few crazy people buying their product.
Would you like us to move to, we have a few questions.
All right, okay. Is that why people are laughing? Because the questions are going on? All right.
So we have one from Mihai that has the most votes. I will read it. Did it ever happen that because of one of your decisions, you've lost a considerable amount of money? Was it a mistake or a deliberate decision? Was it a mistake or a deliberate decision to lose money?
I would love the answer to that to be no. I've never made a single mistake. No, in my first startup we made a huge mistake, and I actually did a whole. 3 entrepreneurs stood up in front of an audience in Boston, and we went through our 3. Each of us had really big mistake in our companies, so it felt like therapy afterwards. So now I'm okay to talk about it. So we had, and I think I've seen this happen with a few companies. So you're a startup, and you have a vision of where your product is going, what your value proposition is, and then a big customer comes to you and says, we like your product, but it needs to be changed in this way and this way and this way. And you go, well, our product doesn't do that. And then the customer says, yeah, but we're going to buy, I don't remember the amount now, but say $20 million worth of your equipment if you make those changes. It's a hard decision, isn't it? Because it's taking you away from your focus, but it's a $20 million order. It's hard. And it wasn't just, I'll make myself feel a little better by saying it wasn't just my decision. And, you know, as a management team, as a board, we chose to go after the $20 to $25 million order. I don't remember exactly what it was. And then we put a lot of our engineers on that project. So we moved away from we still did some work on our main focus, but we put a lot of effort into this project. And that company, instead of spending 25 million, one day I got to the office to find out that the company had filed for bankruptcy. And they bought 1 unit from us at whatever that was, $40,000 or $50,000. So that turned out to be a huge mistake, and set us back in the market a year or so. But you guys can understand how you make that, how that mistake could be made. But it does show you that you do have to. It's a very hard thing to do, but as an entrepreneur, you have to be prepared to say no sometimes. You have to, and believe me, I know it's hard, but you have to stay focused on where you think the gold is. You know, if you think the gold is over there, you've got to keep going in that direction. You know, go in this direction because you think it might be a shortcut to the gold. Sometimes is a mistake.
I think it's very hard to understand which is the best way. Like 25 million, should I stick to the same market?
No, but I think what we should have recognized is that this customer wanted what they wanted. We understood why they wanted it, but no other customer in the world was ever going to buy the product because what they wanted was so special. It was special to their application, if that makes sense. And so we should have recognized that probably nobody else was ever going to buy the product, and we probably should have recognized that the company itself was a little out of control, and we didn't recognize those things. Yeah. Well, they were a public company, so we were able to. We knew what their financials were. We knew. What made it worse was they bought equipment from a company located just a few kilometers from us, and made that company very, very successful. So we thought, oh, we're going to do the same as them, you know. So.
What is the skill? What is the one skill that you have or quickly learned that you consider made you stay on top of your game for so long?
Yeah, if there is a top of your game. I think one of the things I talk to entrepreneurs about all the time is it doesn't matter what your opinion is. It doesn't matter what your friend's opinion is. It only matters what the market thinks, right? It only matters what customers think. So you've got to get out of the mindset of saying, I think it's a good idea, or my friend thinks it's a good idea, or even worse, my investor thinks it's a good idea, because they know less than you, believe me. The only thing that's important is what the market, so your mindset has got to be, all right, I know nothing, how do I figure out what the right thing to know is, and that's by running experiments with customers. It's by talking to customers a lot, and it's by running experiments, because that's the only thing that matters. And I think, you know, if you take one message away from tonight, it's to think about the entrepreneurs have got to be thinking of, how do I experiment all the time? And one of the things that I find very sad is when investors express opinions to entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs think, oh, it's an investor, they must know what they're talking about, let me change product direction, and instead of selling to men, I'm going to sell to women because my investor told me that was the right thing to do. And then they do that. 5 minutes later, the investor has forgotten about that conversation. They've gone out of the room, they've gone and had dinner, they never think about that conversation again. You as the entrepreneur are now trying to change your product and your market, and that's the wrong thing to do. So don't think that anybody is smarter than you. You know, if you guys talk, hopefully with the entrepreneurs today, I didn't ever tell them that's wrong or that's right. I told them that sounds interesting, but how do you test it? So that's my big message.
I remember that. Before we go there, I would like to ask you, what would you suggest a startup should look? So which resources of financing a startup should look for, starting from bootstrapping maybe, another?
Right. So that's a big question now, isn't it? So obviously it depends on what kind of business you are. But one thing I want to say is, and I see this with startups all the day. They raise money. They raise some money for an investor, and they think that is victory. They think that's something to celebrate, right? And I did it. I raised money and went out and had a few drinks and thought I was a genius for raising money. It's not, okay? It's just a mechanism to move your business forward. It's just like if you were driving from, you know, here to Paris, you have to stop all the time at the gas stations to get gas. That's all it is to you. It's just fuel to drive your idea and grow your idea. It's not success itself. Getting to Paris is success, not getting to the gas station is not success. Or learning how to fuel your car with gas. I think we all can do that. So I think, but in terms of the question, first of all, so, you know, even as an investor, I've heard investors, sensible investors say this: do not raise money unless you have to. I mean, if you can, because for a couple of things. One is if you don't have to give ownership of your company away to somebody, that's good, right? It's good. And secondly, investors are very annoying people. So if you can keep them away from your company, you can keep those annoying people away.
How to handle that?
How do you handle investors? Do not give investors any surprises. Keep them informed of the company. Keep them regularly informed, once a month, once every 3 months, an email, tell them what's going on in the company. No surprises, but be careful about how much you allow them inside the company. Do not ever make the mistake of thinking an investor is your friend. Okay, they're not your friend, believe me. They're not your friend, they're a business colleague, right? So it's important. Obviously you can deal with them professionally, you can go out to dinner with them, but don't think they're a friend. In the end, their objective is to make their investment positive. And if that means getting rid of you, if they think that's what they have to do, they're going to get rid of you. So don't think of them as friends, think of them as business colleagues. I'm very, you know, in terms of raising money, I think if you can get your customers to help fund the company, that's a great thing. I have a friend that will only start a company if you can get a purchase order first. A purchase order and a check, a cash first. Microsoft did not take very much investment money in. they did contracts for customers, they developed code, they sold it, they got money. So I think think of all of those as possible possible routes to you building the company. And by the way, the more progress you make, the easier it is to raise money. So if you make some considerable progress and then you raise money, then you're the one that's in charge, not the investor. Because lots of investors will be interested in a company that's made good progress and has got good customers. So think about that, because if you're trying to raise money when you've got no progress, it takes too long and it's too exhausting. So it's much more fun to be trying to build your company than go around trying to raise money. So
there is a little bit of confusion between the angel investor and the venture capital fund.
Right.
Can you delimitate those two and explain what is the difference between them?
Yeah, so the question about angel investing and venture capital. So angel investors are, first of all, they're investing their own money. That's a big difference, isn't it? Venture capital is investing other people's money. You know, a venture capitalist, that's their job. They're like they're a money manager, basically. They're managing other people's money. And they're managing, their particular role is to invest in really high risk but high reward companies. Angel investors are investing their own money. And I think there's two types of angel money. I think there are angels who make they do a lot of investments. They understand startups. They may have been in a startup before. They may have run a startup. They may be investing some of the money they made out of the startup. I think those are good investors. Be very careful about angel investors who know nothing about startups and know nothing about if you're in tech, they know nothing about tech. In America, we always say those angel investors were probably dentists. Be careful about taking money from dentists because as soon as something goes wrong, like startups are like this, right? Something goes right one day, the next day it goes wrong, and then it goes right, and you have to adjust to that. If you're a dentist and you don't understand that because their business just went like this, they're going, well, why did that go wrong? What are you doing? Do you know what you're doing? Why are you running this company? When am I going to get my money back? A professional investor is somebody who does this professionally is not going to say that. So it's a long way of saying be careful about who you take money from, because you're going to be living with that person, not literally living, but you're going to be with that person for the next few years. You're probably going to be talking to them once a week or once a month. You're probably going to be seeing them. If that's a person that you can't stand the sight of after 6 months, that's going to be a problem. So, be careful who you take money from. Try and take money from people who, can understand startups, understand entrepreneurs, and are going to be somebody that's going to support you, rather than just criticize you all the time when things go wrong. So I know it's hard to say no to people with money, but think about the next few years.
It seems like business angels can become business demons for startups.
Well, I think the angels, the people I get upset with, investors, are those who want to prove how smart they are, right? So if I walk into any of your companies, 100 times more about your company, about the market, about your customers than I do, right? Let's say I visit with you for 2 hours a month. How much do I really know? I know something, but 100 times more. The investors I don't like are those who come in and try and prove how smart they are by saying, that's wrong. Why are you doing that? And you should be going here. And I think those people do entrepreneurs a disservice, and that's when they turn into demons. So one of your jobs as an entrepreneur, believe it or not, is to ignore advice. You'll get, apart from the advice I gave you to, no, I'm just joking. You'll get a lot of advice given to you. You know, your mother and father are going to give you advice. You know, your uncle who ran a startup 20 years ago is going to give you advice. Your job is to smile and say, that's really great, and then go away and then decide whether you're going to take it or ignore it. But you as an entrepreneur, it's your business, right? It's you, you're the one building that business, and by definition, you're going to get probably as much bad advice as good advice. So your job is to carefully think about it afterwards, talk to the rest of your team, decide whether it's good or bad, but don't be afraid of throwing it away if it's not the right thing for your company. So it's an important, and I think it's difficult for young entrepreneurs because young entrepreneurs see somebody that's older than them, that's been successful, and they think they know they should take that advice. Even if you're 18 years old, you probably still know more about the business and the market than that investor. So you have to be, you have to be confident about your own opinions and your own strategy.
We have a business proposition here. Would you like to support financially a youth-run movement? Wine tours and weekend in Moldova are on us.
I have no idea. Come and see me afterwards.
But this is, by the way, it brings me to a memory where we were in Boston talking about angel groups and how angels are working in the US, and I asked you bluntly, would your angels come to Moldova and invest in Moldova? And you said no. Can you tell us why, and maybe if you changed your mind?
Well, I think your question was about angel investors mostly. So, angel investors, believe me, it's nothing about Moldova they don't like. They don't like going to New York. So, they like to invest in companies that are close to them geographically. So, New York is 4 hours away. They don't like investing in New York. So, Boston Angels like to invest locally because they want to visit the CEO and talk to them and have coffee with them and help them. Now, whether they're helping or not, I don't know. But so that was really the reason. So it's very unusual for a Boston angel to invest anywhere more than 50 kilometers from Boston. So that was the reason for no. Wasn't anything really to do with Moldova. But venture capitalists are different. And we were having this, when we were in the Ministry of Economics yesterday, I was having this discussion. US venture capitalists are traveling further and further in order to look for good deals. And many of the Boston venture capitalists, so venture capitalism is we have a lot of venture capital companies in Boston, and a lot of their investments are in Europe. So they're prepared to get on a plane and invest for the right deal. But in terms of Moldova, I think the main thing that has to be changed is there needs to be some development in the corporate law here. There has to be the ability to set up a corporate entity like you can in Western Europe and the US, and
like a C Corp.
In the US we call them C corporations. So those, Apple or Google or any of those companies are C corporations. Most startups in the US are C corporations. There needs to be an equivalent of that, and you'd be glad to know that Olga told me I had to mention that when I was in the ministry yesterday. So I did, and they told me 2 or 3 months that's going to change. So now, whether you guys believe that, I have no idea, but I'm just telling you what I heard. So I think that's, and I think some Moldovan companies like you guys are registering your companies elsewhere, which might mitigate that problem.
Let's go back to the questions. Is there any chance you come with your great idea to an investor and it is refused to actually steal That is, you refuse to actually steal it and use it for personal investors' purposes. So investor who steals the idea of entrepreneur.
What do you think the answer to that question is? Yes? Generally, the answer to that question is no. But I do have this from startups. I've had startups come into my office and I say, great, nice to meet you. How can I help you? And they say, I'm working on a startup. And I say, that's great. Tell me about what you're doing. And they say, no, I can't tell you what I'm doing. And I say, oh, okay. Let's go, what should we talk about then? And eventually they say, and after we've, talked about the weather and football and things, they say, well, maybe I can tell you a little bit about my idea. I'm like, okay. And then it usually turns out to be a terrible idea. Even though I told you I never say it's a terrible idea, some of these are the worst, the people who don't want to share the idea. This is advice generally about your startups. If you think about the benefits you get from being secret, or the benefits you get from talking to people and getting contacts and getting referred to people and getting advice, helping you execute, it's much more important. Execution is much more important than privacy. Most entrepreneurs, I was going to say most of you, I don't mean most of you, I mean most of entrepreneurs generally, they're not working on unique technology. They're going to be successful because they execute. And so you should be maximizing your ability to execute. And by talking to, I know entrepreneurs who will talk to anybody they see about their idea. They'll talk to them on the bus, they'll talk to them on the train, they'll talk to people at parties. And it's amazing who you actually get connected with if you're prepared to talk about your idea.
Yeah, you're right. The gap between execution and idea is so big, so it's investable.
If you do have something that nobody else in the world has ever thought of, that you've invented, then go and patent it. And in that case, you have got my permission to not talk to anybody until you've patented it. But I think that's a very, very few, that's a very, very small number.
What about the non-disclosure agreement? Are investors asked to sign an NDA before the idea is presented? Is it normal?
If you ask an investor to sign a non-disclosure agreement, they're going to say no, and then you're going to be embarrassed that you asked them, because they're going to say to you, no investors ever sign non-disclosure agreements, and then you're going to say, well, why didn't I know that? So they will not sign that, because if you think about it, they can't, because they're meeting so many companies, and some of those companies are similar companies or similar markets. They can't sign an NDA and then say to the next 10 companies, I can't meet with you because I've signed an NDA. So no investor and no university professor, by the way, will ever sign an NDA, or shouldn't.
We have a very interesting question from Mircha. How to correctly negotiate the percentage of equity with the early investors when your startup is just an idea or just an MVP?
So I said the hardest thing to teach was revenue projections. I actually lied to you. I realized I just lied to you. The hardest thing to teach is equity splits. Both with you, it's a complicated subject, both with you and the investors, but also you and the team. I'm not looking at you guys because I know how you're doing it. It's difficult. So let me give you just a couple of tips early on. With the team, do not postpone the discussion. It only gets worse. So let's say two of you are friends and you've known each other and you start a company and you're a little embarrassed to say, let's talk about how we're going to split this company up. And you think, well, we'll just make a little more progress and then I'll talk about it then we'll make a bit more progress and I'll talk about it. Then the conversation can get really difficult, because if you realize the two of you are way apart, now you've got 6 months or 12 months into the startup, and now you're arguing like crazy with each other. So talk about it early. My second tip, please do not split the company 50-50 if there's two founders, right?
Why not? Why not 50?
By the way, I'll give this advice and about 50% of you will ignore it, I understand. Because people ignore this advice. It shouldn't be 50-50 because then you don't have a tiebreaker. So make it 50.5 and 49.5, but one of you has to be the decision maker at the end. Hopefully you'll agree on everything, but at the end of the day there has to be a tiebreaker. So I know most of you will avoid it because they're like, oh, I've known this person since I was 5 years old. They will never do anything that will be wrong, you know. Believe me, that doesn't work either. So 50-50 with investors. It's one of the strange things, or the thing you have to understand about investing, about taking investment, is that it's not in the investor's interest to screw you on valuation and ownership. Now that doesn't, you're probably thinking, well, why aren't they driving the best possible deal? But remember, if you're an early stage investor, you're starting a partnership with somebody. It's not like buying a second-hand car. You know, if I'm buying a car from Olga, and I know I'm the only one interested in buying that car, I'm going to screw her on the deal, and I'm going to get the best possible deal, because I'm going to drive that car away and I'm never going to see Olga again. So I'm going to be hard ass, right? You know, nobody else wants your shitty car. I'm only going to give you $2,000 for it. You know, I mean, you can have, but it's not the same when you're raising money, because you're going to be there for a long time, and the investor needs you to be happy with the deal, because the investor needs you, the entrepreneur, to work like crazy for the next 2 or 3 years to make the startup successful. And if I give you a bad deal, 6 months in, you realize this was a bad deal, and you walk away, and I'm the investor, now I'm left with a company with no management. What did I achieve? Now I have to go and find people to run the company, and now you just gave me a headache that I didn't want, because remember, I invested in you as people, and then you walk away, and now I'm like, oh hell, you know. So most deals are done within you know, if you think about Boston or San Francisco, most of these deals are done within a very small range of valuation, because that valuation makes sense to the investor and it makes sense to the entrepreneur. So most early stage deals in Boston are done around, with angels, are done around a valuation somewhere between 3.5 and 4 million. And virtually all of them are done within the same range. So what's driving the valuation is not so much about the company, but it's about what makes sense for both sides in the ownership, and it's also what other deals are getting done at the time. You know, if it's 2008, the prices were lower. At the moment, valuations are really high. Because the thing to remember is, if a deal is a bad deal, if you're an investor, if it's not a company you believe in, there is no price that makes that a good deal. Does that make sense? If it's a bad deal that I don't believe is going to be successful, I don't believe it's the right team, I don't believe it's the right market, there's no price that suddenly becomes a good deal. Because the company's not going to be successful. So if I lower the valuation, it doesn't suddenly become a good deal. It still stays a bad deal. So really, valuation is not really argued that much in these early stage deals because they're all coming in a fairly tight band, driven by the need for certain amounts of ownership. And it's the same with venture capital. You know, I joke with entrepreneurs that I can value your company, and they say, well, you don't know anything about my company. I say, how much do you want to raise? And they say, I want to raise $3 million. I say, well, then I think your valuation is going to be $3 million. They go, oh, well, what if I want to raise $4 million? Well, then I think the valuation is $4 million. Because what's driving is the ownership that the VC comes out with at the end of the deal. Making sure they have the right ownership is what allows them to get the returns that they want. Hope that wasn't too complicated. But,
Do we have some questions from the public before we go back to Slido? Anyone wants to speak up?
Hi, my name is Anna and I'm a psychologist. The traditional question that I used to ask entrepreneurs is how do they cope in order to cope with stress? Because as an entrepreneur there is a lot of emotions, and as you mentioned, a lot of ups and downs. What do you recommend usually, and what about yourself if you are doing anything to develop resilience?
I think I'm beyond that. When I was a first-time entrepreneur, a venture capitalist gave me some advice which I stuck with throughout my entire career. So if you imagine that being an entrepreneur is like this, what he told me is you've got to take off the top and you've got to take off the bottom. So what that means is, you know, when you think you've had, you know, the best day ever and every customer is always going to buy your product because you had a good phone call, take it down a little bit, you know, don't get too excited, you know, ratchet that down. And the same on the bottom end, you know, your customer canceled their order, the customer told you your product doesn't work, it was a terrible day. You've got to try and take the bottom off and then just get some sleep, come at it the next day, know that there's going to be a solution, and it's about resiliency. But your question is well taken. I mean, there was one point in my first company, I think, actually I think it happened in both companies, where we were getting, I remember this actually, so we had a summer party for our employees and their families. So we're having a picnic, right? So everybody's eating burgers and everybody's having fun. And my co-founder came over to me and said, so you see all these people, you know, all these children, we only have money for another month of paying those people. If we don't raise money in the next month, those kids, you know, their mother or father is making another job. I'm like, oh, right, thank you very much. But that's stress, right? I mean, there's one thing being stressed for yourself, but then you see the responsibility you have, and so we were able to raise money, but yeah, I think you've got to remember that I know it's going to sound cliche, but you've got to remember the sun comes up the next day, you're an intelligent person, you'll work out what the right answer is.
That's a very good advice. Do we have more questions from the public? Anyone?
Then I'll go back to Slido. How to recognize that a startup is dead or is going to flop soon?
No, because you know, it's hard to say that. You know, there's some startups that just refuse to die, and sometimes those startups end up being successful. So I think I think what I notice is if the management team is just, you know, they're just rigid on their market, and the customers keep saying to them, "We're not buying your product," and they don't switch, then I know that company is going to die. But then there are other companies. There was one company recently. As an angel investor, I actually a few weeks before we came, I actually got my check from this company because they were successful and sold the company. But this company, honestly, was dead. Was it cat? A cat has 9 lives. Is that this was a cat of startups. I mean, it basically went after a market that disappeared on it. They tried something. They were raising money all the time. They were raising money. They were raising little bits, and eventually they found a market. And the last few months, they've sold for a very nice price. And so sometimes I thought that company was dead so many times. So, you know, what do you say? Resilience and grit. Those entrepreneurs who ran that company were incredibly resilient.
May I ask you, what was your return on investment for this company?
You can ask me. I think I can cut. Let me think. Yeah. I think it was a. It was about 10 times money in. Yeah. Should I tell you about the ones I got nothing back up? No.
Yes, you have the story.
Yeah.
So we have a question from Dan. Is it possible to take some investments just with an idea, or is it required a demo version of a product?
So I think it depends on the market you're in. But for most, if you're a software company, it's very difficult to get money just on an idea. Because software companies are so easy to build, the entrepreneurs want you to go and build something. The investors, The investors want you to go and build something and prove that there's customers for that product. But if you've got an idea about curing cancer, it's very hard to make progress without any money. So, but again, you have to have a plausible reason. You have to have maybe come out of a lab with some sort of idea of where you could go. So, but generally, one of the things that's changed investing over the last, or in entrepreneurship generally over the last 30 or 40 years, is that software startups have become so cheap to build. You know, you don't have to buy servers. You can just take space in the cloud. You have open source software to help. You can outsource to cheaper places in the world. There's been a lot of reasons why software startups are very cheap. And so there's a lot of software startups. There's an explosion of startups. So investors are saying, I want to see some proof. So if you have my advice with any of you, if you can prove, if you can develop some proof of concept that you can test and show customers are interested, first of all, it makes it easier to raise money and quicker to raise money, and those things are important. With an idea, you may never raise money. So.
Okay. Where to invest at my 20s?
Yeah, I don't know whether I should be giving investment advice. In your 20s, what's the best place to invest? High risk, because you've got a long time before you have to retire. So, right? So, high risk is the answer.
Okay. The other question would be: there is any possibility for you to pick a deal in Moldova and invest in it? In which conditions would you invest here?
That's right. Buy my summer house in Moldova. I think we talked about corporate structure, so there has to be there has to be a vehicle for investing that makes sense. But I've invested outside of the US and would do so again. I don't think it's particularly to do with Moldova. It's the same thing, you know, right team, interesting market, interesting differentiation, that kind of stuff. I think one of the issues for investors in countries like, and I don't want to just keep saying Moldova, it's countries, you know, countries like this, is that an important thing to remember about investors is, and I sometimes have to say this to young entrepreneurs, they're investors. They're not just there people to give you money. If they invest $10, they want $100 back. You know, they invest $1,000, they want $10,000 back. They're looking for big multiples. So to make that happen, it means that your startup has to be bought by a bigger company, or potentially has to go public, which, you know, is difficult, right? So I think evidence that startups here are getting bought would definitely help the investment climate. We talked about that the other day.
So what would you suggest for a Moldavian company? Where should it look for funding from the beginning? Not the US, probably not the US investors, somewhere closer?
Well, I mean, talking to entrepreneurs today, I mean, you're all doing a great job of traveling around Europe, going to accelerators, going to incubators, going to investment meetings. So, you know, what I would say is there is capital available for good ideas. So, you know, if you try to find angel investment here in Moldova and it's not been successful, then keep traveling, keep doing what you're doing. I mean, there are so many startup events through Europe. You don't have to come to the States. There's plenty of action here. So continue to expose yourself. Continue to build your network. You know, I think that for any of you who are CEO of your startup, one of the key skills you have is building network, right? And it's, you know, for many of us, it's not a natural skill. But for a CEO, it's really important that you build network. And so, you know, that means, you know, we're following up with people. It means keeping people informed of what you're up to. I'll give you an example of this. So I hosted in Boston. I hosted a visit by 10 UK startups. That'll be about $10, I think, that glass. I always forget. So I arranged an event. These 10 UK startups were visiting. I arranged some investors to meet them. We all spent like 10 minutes with each startup. But what I remember about this, and it impressed all of the investors in the room, is that all of these startups then started communicating with us. Not individually, but they added us to their mailing list, and they were sending out every month an update on their company. So I met some of these people for 10 minutes, but then I was able to track the progress of their companies through this email. And we were all they all followed up with thank you emails, and then they all put us on their list. And so it was helpful for us to watch the progress. So that's just an example. You know, they've been trained actually by their accelerator to do that. But there's a tip for you as you meet people that think could be helpful. Get them on the mailing list. Send out you know, a monthly update on the progress of your company. Oh, and by the way, make the progress doesn't have to be, you know, we're conquering the world. We've got 1,000 customers. You know, the government of Moldova is just about to put our product in every town in Moldova. You know, it doesn't have to be hyped. Just give them, you know, we did this. Next month we hope to do this. And even some entrepreneurs say, these are the things we've got problems with. These are the things we need help with. Do you know anybody that works for Boeing, do you need, we'd like to contact somebody. So you can ask for help from those people. And a lot of those people want to help you, believe me. That's networking is a very important skill. If you're not good at it, I'm sorry. If you're the CEO, it's part of the job responsibility. So, make yourself good at it.
What is an acceptable joke to use at a meeting with an investor? Do you have jokes?
No, I'm not a great joker. But I like the question, actually. I know somebody, was that you that put that question? Oh, it was you. I knew it was one of you three, because you're enjoying posting questions, I can tell. I think you've got to be I think when you go into a meeting with an investor, you've got to be very careful of the tone of the meeting. So it doesn't have to be super serious, but I would not crack jokes. There's no problem with you being humorous in your presentation, but keep it limited. You don't know these people. They're looking at investing money with you. It's a serious meeting, so I think you've got to think about the tone and think about the language you use. I've seen some entrepreneurs talk to the investment group I'm part of, and it's as if they're in the bar with their friends. That's not the right language, for a business meeting. So, I know I'm not being very clear, but maybe you sort of know what I'm talking about. You want your personality to come over, and so you can make a joke, about your football team losing last night or something. But be careful about pushing that too far. And remember, you're in a business meeting, and remember, they're not your friends.
I used to watch the Shark Tank.
Right.
These are very good examples of different pitches, and also to a podcast called The Pitch. If you can check it, it's also very good because it's like the whole description of the whole presentation of the pitch. Very nice.
Well, can I just say something about Shark Tank? Is there a Shark Tank equivalent here on TV? Do you know what we're talking about? Oh, that's good. That's good. The Shark Tank is I think it's a program that started in the UK, and now it's in a lot of countries. It basically entrepreneurs get to pitch their product in front of investors on TV, and it's the worst thing that happened to my teaching job, because everybody thinks that investment is like Shark Tank, and I keep trying to tell them it's TV. But if you haven't seen it, then you're not corrupted, so that's good.
But Netflix has it, so you have to check it. What are the most promising areas of investment, probably in US or in the world? In what areas it is better to start up? What are the trends?
So I think you've got to be very careful about following trends. So the world does not, if you think about where VC money is going at the moment, artificial intelligence, machine learning, these sort of blockchain and cryptocurrency, I think you've got to be careful about deciding you're going to do a startup in that area because it's a trend. And by the time it's a trend, you may be too late, right? There's already 500 startups in that space. So focus on solving problems you care about. And if blockchain is a technology that you can use, is the best technology to help you solve the problem you care about, then fine, use blockchain. But focus on stuff you care about. Focus on problems you think need solving, because you'll drive yourself crazy if you try and just follow the next trend, because by the time you figure it out, you may be too late. So
We have 3 more questions. Okay, last one. Mihai, who is Mihai? Mihai, the last one. No, Mihai is that guy. No. How fast?
You want to get to the wine, is that?
How fast do you decide if the idea pitched is worth investing in? How fast?
It's actually a pretty slow process. Yeah. So let me take you through how a deal gets done in an angel group. So our angel group is really big. We have 150 members, so it's a big group. It's a very structured process. So a company meets with a what we call a scouting team. A small number of angels who are experts in that industry. They then evaluate whether it's worth going to the next stage. So and I'll follow on in that in a minute, but I think I know fairly quickly whether it's an interesting company. I certainly don't know very quickly whether it's a good company to invest in. Or put it another way, I think I know pretty quickly a company that will not get investment. Yeah, that's a better way of putting it. And the ones that will get investment, it takes some time. So doing it quickly, so I know you want to get to the wine. So scouting meeting, is it worth going forward to the main group? If yes, you pitch in front of 150 people, maybe it's 100 people, 15-minute pitch, 15-minute questions, you go out of the room, then we talk about you after you've gone out of the room. Then we vote on whether there's sufficient interest to go forward. If there is sufficient, and it doesn't, remember with 100 members, if there's 20 or 25 people who are really interested, that's enough. Okay. You know, even if they only got $10,000 in, that's still $250,000. So you don't need that many members. If there's good, strong interest, then that group will do due diligence, and that's the period where you start to really feel whether this is a good company. So you talk to a potential customer, you might talk to real customers, you might talk to potential customers, you might talk to people who are experts in that industry, so you try and gather as much information as you can. You do background checks on the CEO and the management team. Shall I tell you a story about background checks? Do you want one story? So I was in a previous angel group, and we didn't do background checks on the management team. You know, we took them at their word, and we talked to references. And so there was this one CEO who was an absolutely brilliant presenter. I mean, if he was presenting here, you would all be getting your credit cards out and trying to invest in him. You know, when he presented to this angel group, I could see that the members were like, how quickly can I invest? He was one of those kinds of people. And we invested some money, which afterwards we found out that he used some of our money for expensive holidays, but this is the kind of guy he was. So this experience, you know, you have some experiences where you can still remember where you were when it happened to you. I remember when my colleague from the angel group called me. They were about out of money, and they were raising money from a venture capitalist. And the venture capitalist did do a background check. So this is how vivid this memory is. I'm putting my golf bag in the back of the car, and my phone goes. And it's my friend. They said, the VC's just did a background check on the CEO. And I went, yeah. And he said, the CEO lied about all of his academic qualifications. He claimed an undergraduate degree, he claimed graduate degrees. Turned out that he hadn't completed any of those courses. And, you know, the feeling at the time was, you know, so basically we got cons. So after that, the angel group always did background checks, which is kind of sad, right? But how did I get to that? How do you find? Yeah. Oh, due diligence. Yeah. So we do due diligence, then we go back to the entrepreneur to finalize deal terms. It's not as much a negotiation as you think on deal terms. Generally, it's pretty quick, and then we go back to the members and say, deal terms are finalized. How much is everybody? You know, tell us how much you're in for, and then people respond. I want to invest 10,000. I want to invest 25,000. We gather them all up, go back to the CEO, and then the investment is done. So that's the process, but it can take sort of 3 months, from start to finish. So.
What is the percentage of the companies accepted to financing through the process?
It's tiny. Yeah, it's tiny. We invest in about 1 to 2 companies a month, and we probably are contacted by 200 or 300. So.
We have only 3 minutes left,
okay.
So you can choose the question you would like to answer.
I thought the last one was the last question. What about what advice would you give to the introvert that has to network? Talk to the psychologist over here afterwards, and she'll give you some free advice. So I think you have to just regard it as part of your job. And I know that's easy to say, but I think you have to regard it as part of your job, and then just learn techniques, and then it's almost like you're an actor and you've learned how to play Macbeth or King Lear. You're not Macbeth, but you've learned how to play Macbeth. Just do that while you've got the CEO hat on, and then at the weekend you can go back to being an introvert. Right? You can talk to nobody over the weekend, just your cat if you want to. But when you're in the job, you just have to do it. And I think the way to do it is talk to people who are good at it, just learn some techniques, and then just execute on those techniques, as if you're an actor. But it's very, and it'll become easier. The more you do it, the easier it'll become.
And the last one, I promise. But this is more to ask you, would you like to suggest some books for us to read?
Yeah, so there is so much good stuff out on entrepreneurship. Some of the books that I use a lot, Startup Owner's Manual by Steve Blank. Steve Blank is a entrepreneur turned professor. He teaches at Stanford. He's got a very good blog. He publishes a lot of good blog posts. So that's Steve Blank, B-L-A-N-K. His books are good. I like the books by Walter Osterwalder. He's from Switzerland. There's a book on value propositions and a book on business model generation that's very good. What else? And I think that every one of you should read The Lean Startup. Though I'm a little worried about how some of the principles of Lean Startup have got kind of corrupted. So, but I think this idea of experimentation and testing is covered so well in that probably you probably should read that. But I recently gave a talk at a conference where I said that the Lean Startup is dead and we should stop teaching it. So that got me a good audience. But let me just say, if you don't mind, in microcosm why I'm a little worried about that book is the way that there's a phrase many of the entrepreneurs use today with me, minimum viable product or MVP. In that book, it means anything that helps test the assumptions you have around the business. So it's that mindset of experimentation. Entrepreneurs are using it to mean the first version of their product. And so the terminology has got a little corrupted. So I know in America, so that's a little in the weeds. So I know that's a little minor thing for you to think about. But think about that book as a way of teaching you about experimentation, validation. A lot of what people teach in entrepreneurship now is about how do you validate an idea without spending 5 years of your life realizing that you have an idea that sucks. You know, it's better to spend 2 or 3 months of your life, figure out whether you've got a good idea or not, and then adjust that idea, pivot that idea if it needs changing. But that's the mindset that book's trying to teach.
Wonderful. I smell the pizza smell. Before we close the meeting today, I would like to mention that tomorrow Ian is doing the workshop on business model, I think. Daniela maybe can tell you more, and if you want to participate, you're free to come. Doreen, the floor is yours just to close it. Jan, thank you very much for the wonderful discussion. Thank you very much for so many advices. Thank you for taking this adventure seriously and coming to Moldova, accepting the invitation.
Well,
it was amazing.
Olga asked me, and I haven't done a good job of being able to say no to Olga, so thank you.
Thank you very much.